Hello everybody, what is up? My name is Alchemy. Today we are going to be learning how to make metallic-esque lead sounds kind of like this. And it's not too difficult. It does have a couple of neat tricks that kind of fall in between. We're not going to be using resonators, but we will be within the confinements of faceplant. This is a super patch, so don't let all this stuff freak you out. It does not require nearly as much work as this will lead you to believe. But yeah, if you're interested, I make super patches kind of like this. Those are available on the website, but that's not why we're here. All right, so that sounds good to you. Let's go ahead and get cracking. I would love it if you crack that like button. Oh god, that was cheesy, but whatever. So let's start with a transient shaper. We're just going to hit clip on here and turn the speed up. This is pretty much our soft clipper, if you will. You can put a limiter on, but it will color the sound a little bit too much. But what we want to focus on is timbre and then space and then like texture, I guess would probably be the way to do that. And we'll talk about some options to utilize this along the way. So before I talk about anything else, I do want to mention that wavetables, specifically like weird ones, are a great place to start. Because if you have something on here that where you're not really too worried about it, but maybe the fundamental is kind of removed, but you've got maybe a second harmonic, you do something kind of like that, it's already going to give you something that's kind of dingy as a sound. So check this out. And if we were to utilize this, you can kind of already see that like this is a really good starting point to try to base other things off of. Now we're going to do some more stuff to this though, and perhaps scroll through a wavetable to where we're going to have different options. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you need to have like a morphing wavetable in order to get something like this, but it can be helpful in just having different choices to cycle through whenever you're focused on trying to find the right sound. So what I'm doing is this one in particular, I'm kind of just putting the fundamental all the way up at the top and then having just weird sounds. And we're kind of playing between like just under noise. So if all of this is up, you're going to have pretty much just noise, and that's not going to help you out. But having something that has a weird slope, or, you know, let's say you can make mountains or rolling hills or something to where it kind of dives down, will give you something that will be a little bit more applicable to figure out what is the best, you know, what is the best sounding to you. So now that we have this, I'm going to utilize the crossfader here and just go like that. And so now we've got a cycling wavetable that we can move through. That this is a little bit more simple. This is a little bit more complex. We can kind of just play with this and figure out, you know, what is the best sounding thing in that particular time. Now, I will say that you can apply FM to this, but if you did, I would probably suggest utilizing a simple waveform, kind of like this, and then applying the complex waveform to the simple waveform. The reason why is because, I don't know, it just typically sounds better, at least to me. But if we do something like this, then you can already hear that we're kind of in that bell territory. But what we would want to do is probably set this to where the harmonic, or sorry, the phase amount is going to diminish over time. Because if we have an arbitrary harmonic, the sound is cool, but now we're not actually playing the first, I guess, or the original tone. So cool. So it doesn't really matter. You can do vice versa. So if you want to, we could do something like this instead, to where we go here, and then let's experiment with playing with phase on this. And as you'll see, it'll kind of change the waveform in a strange way, kind of like so. But what we'll do is we'll set this on here, set the harmonic to 1, and then change this and see what that does. You see, I kind of favored this one, or this way, for this particular waveform. That's just because I like the fuzz of this, and I like injecting this on here to kind of like give it something that has a more consistent waveform within it. So yeah, you can do some spread if you want to, and if you have this at a very small amount of detuning and then spread it out, it's pretty pleasing. You can also play with the different unison modes here in order to get different variations. We're just going to leave this at 1 for now, though. All right, so some really easy things that you can do to kind of give it that interesting texture, I guess, if you will, is we're going to set a long release on this, but what we're going to do is move this up to 12, and then we'll set this on minus. We can also play with plus. We need this to be a lot shorter, so. And as you can hear, like, we're already kind of getting into that territory of like, all right, well, this is starting to sound familiar. So next up, let's add a shaper table. The shaper table you can kind of go ham with. I'm going to turn the DC filter off and just turn the drive up a bit. And then I'm also going to add a little bit more of a tail to this. And then we can change the polyphony to 1. So that way it'll re-trigger whenever we hit that. So. We can also add an LFO if we want to kind of slowly move this off by like 0.5-ish. Somewhere around there. And set this to be really slow. And then right click this and set this to to never re-trigger. That's what I meant to do. And what's going to happen is this is going to drift the pitch over time regardless. So So we're already kind of there, right? And now we just need to color this in a way that's going to be a little bit sharper. And then we're kind of off to the races. But it's really easy to make these kinds of sounds, especially if this is just all you're going for when it comes into timbre and stuff. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the effects that we can utilize in which to make this sound a little bit more metallic. You can use the comb filter on here, which I will, but for a different use case. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a different comb filter. So what this is going to do is kind of just create these arbitrary harmonic peaks and dips. And you do want to be careful with this because especially as you get into this region here, it can get kind of dangerous. So you might see me do something like this to where as we go higher up the frequency range, I'm going to start to kind of be a little bit more sporadic with lowering that kind of thing. Usually within this stuff though, you can kind of go as crazy as you want to, but we've got this comb filter that we can offset with pitch. So if we utilize this and grab a note and set this to, let's just say C2, then we can set this to 48, give or take. And now this will key track. Nice. And then we can double this to emphasize the resonance on here. So before you do this, or actually before you play a note though to test it out, do this because you don't know if this is going to be super sharp. It's really important that you all protect your ears and like don't try to do this at a super loud volume. So, but now that we have that, seems okay. But do you hear how the resonances are already kind of pulling that out and making it have like a interesting sound? We can also try the distortion after. I honestly can't tell the difference in this use case, so, you know, use your best judgment. But let's go ahead and go into the convolution reverb now. And we can find anything on here that has a relatively small room. We can also move the stretch lower in order to kind of like raise the pitch of the convolution. There we go. Now within this, you do want to kind of be careful, so to not fatigue our ears. You see that there's all these mid-highs here. We do kind of want to Maybe also dip this. It's going to be dependent on like what notes you play as well, but you know, if you're playing like a melody or whatever, you might just want to reach for some kind of compression instead. To where if you want some kind of consistency, you can, though that might not totally fix the problem. So short attack, relatively long release, and then adjust the makeup gain sparingly. Yeah, cool. So with that, we can also add some other spatial things as well. Remember I talked about the comb filter. If we turn this on to stereo and maybe reduce the mix and then have another LFO that is traveling kind of like so, maybe we can adjust the phase so that way it's different. This will tear and kind of create a nice offset of stereo. That's pretty cool. So again, not that you're supposed to do this, but these are just different options to kind of have something that's interesting. So we can saturate that now. And DC filter, go here. And then you can either limit it or whatever. But utilizing this is a really good starting point. If you want to kind of be a little bit more classic with it, I guess, you can use short delays, which just about everything is a short delay in the first place. But if you turn the mix down and then adjust the feedback, you have to be careful because at this time frame, it's usually going to have a consistent tone. So finding a nice middle ground in between and then blending it in will kind of help you have that. But a lot of times, like something has a consistent resonance if it's metallic. And that's because like the anatomy of the device doesn't change. So sometimes it might have some kind of, you know, weird nasally thing, or if you're playing a flute, it's like it has a particular kind of consistent resonance within it. So adjusting the delay can kind of sometimes give you a nice middle ground. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it is making a difference and it is kind of affecting the overall physicality of the sound. But yeah, absolutely, this is totally something that you can do to kind of help give it a cool extra texture, I guess, if you will. You can add reverb to this if you want to, and you can also get into your filtering and all that other stuff. But I think that for the most part, this is generally the coolest and easiest way to get all that. Some extra bonus tips would be to try using a pitch shifter. So if you set this up at like an octave, either up or down, let's do an octave down because we're already playing a pretty high note. You turn the correlation off and turn the grain size down, kind of just blend it in. Let's hear what this sounds like without or at 100% so that we can tell the difference. You see how you get like some weird, just like, you know, brassy. And then as you blend that in, then you can get some really cool layering or pseudo layering, if you will, into that sound. And then of course, like go back and correct it and, you know, get everything that you need to do. And one thing that I would say is if you didn't know this, you can create a dynamic EQ inside of Phase Plant. You just need to have access to a filter. It doesn't even need to be an EQ, but it's going to be easier to show you. But what we'll do is we'll create a couple of these guys across the board. And on this, I'm going to grab an audio follower, turn the gain up a little bit, and say, hey, over on this, as this gets louder, I want you to reduce this by, let's just say 6 dB or whatever. So now if something gets kind of peaky and shrieky, that's a bit much, but I think you get the point to where I can utilize this to reduce. And that should help kind of control that a bit. You can set something like this to where it's got 0 attack and some release. And in certain cases, this is actually better than utilizing something like Pro Q, because Pro Q does not have time options on it, unfortunately. It works well. It's like a smart thing or whatever, but this is actually a little bit more consistent. And then you can just adjust the gain to what you want it to be. I'm going to use the peak. And then we can adjust this here. And from there, I know that the sound is kind of annoying now, but you can utilize that to give yourself as much of adjustment to balance the sound out as you need. Now, we went overboard and we made this extremely loud. It doesn't have to be loud. And if you're worried, then you could always put a limiter before the transient shaper. If you do it after the transient shaper, the clip or whatever like doesn't play nicely with the limiter, or like the limiter can't handle the clip signal that's going on after and it blows up, so I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, if you do want to limit it to, say, turn the threshold down to -4 or something and have a little bit longer of a release, then you can control it that way. Just be careful, because you can't really tell in this sound, but especially on drums and like basses and all that, this will affect the timbre in the higher region for sure. So if that doesn't bother you, then don't worry about it, because the sound is already pretty resonant. But yeah, is there anything that I missed? You can use the dual stuff. You can use a Haas if you want to, and if you want to make it more percussive. That's a little bit more dingy, I guess, if you will. Yeah, I guess last tip is we only did phase modulation, but you can also do amplitude modulation and just utilize another thing here where you set this to be amplitude mod in this region. And now we can kind of set this to whatever we want it to be for a different harmonic perhaps here. So if I turn this off, let's turn this off. Let's listen to how this sounds. So it's subtle, but you can hear that it kind of has a little bit of effect with what's going on. There we go. That's a little bit more identifiable. Yeah, so that's kind of cool, because now you can kind of hear it at a rate that seems more detectable. You hear how it's kind of spinning. So now when we add in the wavetable again, and this is also a way of, like, if you're into Riddim or whatever, how you can create certain stuff like that. And I guess the final tip that I'll leave you with is a bass tip, because I wouldn't necessarily create a bass out of this. This would be something that I'd like have an 808 under, or have an 808 under. But you can just use a regular waveform that has a sine wave under it, and then have a high harmonic here as, I guess, reinforcement, but turn it down to where they're not competing with each other, but this will also give you a little bit of timbre as well. And you can also play it with the sync. So see how it kind of creates a metallicness to it? And this is kind of cool, because when I release this, this is dropping this back into a lower octave. So that's kind of sick. But that's definitely an option that you can try, and then, you know, kind of get a middle ground behind all of these. You can also give this a drop off, kind of like what we did at the beginning of the video. You can also so yeah, just some other things that you can mess around with for funsies and kind of enjoy. But yeah, these things are really annoying and very harsh to your ears. So when you're working and trying to figure all this stuff out, please do me a favor and work at a volume that is not too sharp on you. But yeah, that's how you make metallic textures and stuff. I have this track that I did a few days ago. I was listening to some John Casey. That's kind of what inspired this video. But I have this track called Bui Bui, which is ridiculous. Where's my stuff? Hold on one second. My library. There we go. And this is what I made. Yeah, so this is definitely like a throwaway track, but as a concept, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it's something that you can practice or use as a reference. So if you like my stuff, alchemy.com, book a lesson with me. I'd love to help you figure out how to get to the next step of your journey. Or just liking the video and leaving a stupid comment actually helps a lot more than you think. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.